Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanasari Yamuna Tira Vanasari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Anjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Anjana Yamuna Vanasari Jamuna Vanasari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottada Shatta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottada Shatta Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Janitai Gaur Premanande Devo. So reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, chapter entitled London, a Dream Fulfilled. Prabhupada received an invitation to appear on Britain's most popular TV talk show, Late Night Lineup. The interviewer, accustomed to snappy repartee, tried to engage Prabhupada in his style of conversing, avoiding long philosophical answers. Swamiji, he asked, do you have a concept of hell in your religion? Yes, Prabhupada replied, London is hell. The host appeared stunned, as if beaten at his own game from the start. Prabhupada continued, it is always damp, cloudy, and raining. In India, the sun is always shining. The interviewer was still at a loss for words, and Prabhupada, perhaps sensing the man's embarrassment, added, of course, it is a very great credit to the English people to have established such a great civilization in such a climate. There were other questions, and Prabhupada talked for an hour, explaining the Krishna consciousness movement and philosophy. The next day, a London newspaper announced, Swami calls London hell. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 5, text number 28. And it's in prose, so I'll just read it, and then we'll do the word for word. Shri Shuka Uvacha Evang Anushas Yatmajan Swayam Anushishtan Api Loka Nu Sanartang Mahanubhava Parama Surid Bhagavan Rishabha Padesha Upashama Shilanam Uparata Karmanang Mahamuninang Bhakti Jnana Vairagya Lakshanang Paramahanksya Dharmam Upashikshamana Swatanaya Shata Jeshtang Parama Bhagavatang Bhagavaj Jana Parayanang Bharatang Dharani Pala Naya Bishichya Swayang Bhavana Evor Varita Sharira Matra Parigraha Unmata Iva Gagana Paridhana Prakirna Kesha Atman Yaropita Havaniyo Brahma Vartat Pravraja. Word for word, Sri Shuka Uvacha. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Evam, in this way, Anushasya, after instructing, Atmajan, his sons, Swayam, personally, Anushishtan, highly educated in culture, Api, although, Loka Anushasana Artam, just to instruct the people, Maha Anubhava, the great personality, Parama Surit, everyone's sublime well-wisher, Bhagavan, the supreme personality of Godhead, Rishabha Apadesha, who is celebrated and known as Rishabhadev, Upashama Shilanam, of persons who have no desire for material enjoyment, Uparata Kramanam, who are no longer interested in fruitive activities, Maha Muninam, who are sannyasis, Bhakti, devotional service, Jnana, perfect knowledge, Vairagya, detachment, Lakshanam, characterized by Paramahanksya, of the best of human beings, Dharma, the duties, Upashikshamana, instructing, Swatanaya, of his sons, Shata, 100, Jeshtam, the eldest, Parama Bhagavatam, a topmost devotee of the Lord, Bhagavat Jana Parayanam, a follower of the devotees of the Lord, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Bharatam, Bharat Maharaj, Dharani Palanaya, with the view to ruling the world, Abhishitya, placing on the throne, Swayam, personally, Bhavane, at home, Eva, although, Urvarita, remaining, Sharira Matra, the body only, Parigraha, accepting, Gunmata, a madman, Ava, exactly like, Gagana Paridhana, taking the sky as his dress, Prakirana Kesha, having scattered hair, Atmani, in himself, Aropita, keeping, Ahavaniya, the Vedic fire, Brahma Vartat, from the place known as Brahma Varta, Pravraja, began to travel all over the world. Translation. Shukadev Goswami said, thus the great well-wisher of everyone, the Supreme Lord Rishabhadev, instructed his own sons. Although they were perfectly educated and cultured, he instructed them just to set an example of how a father should instruct his sons before retiring from family life. Sannyasis who are no longer bound by fruitive activity and who have taken to devotional service after all their material desires have been vanquished also learn by these instructions. Lord Rishabhadev instructed his 100 sons, of whom the eldest, Bharat, was a very advanced devotee and a follower of Vaishnavas. In order to rule the whole world, the Lord enthroned his eldest son on the royal seat. Thereafter, although still at home, Lord Rishabhadev lived like a madman, naked and with disheveled hair. Then the Lord took the sacrificial fire within himself, and he left Brahma Varta to tour the whole world. Purport. Actually, the instructions given to Lord Rishabhadev's sons were not exactly meant for his sons because they were already educated and highly advanced in knowledge. Rather, these instructions were meant for sannyasis who intended to become advanced devotees. Sannyasis must abide by Lord Rishabhadev's instructions while on the path of devotional service. Lord Rishabhadev retired from family life and lived like a naked madman, even while still with his family. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again, Shukadev Goswami said, thus the great well-wisher of everyone, the Supreme Lord Rishabhadev, instructed his own sons. Although they were perfectly educated and cultured, he instructed them just to set an example of how a father should instruct his sons before retiring from family life. Sannyasis who are no longer bound by fruitive activity and who have taken to devotional service after all their material desires have been vanquished also learn by these instructions. Lord Rishabhadev instructed his 100 sons, of whom the eldest, Bharat, was a very advanced devotee and a follower of Vaishnavas. In order to rule the whole world, the Lord enthroned his eldest son on the royal seat. Thereafter, although still at home, Lord Rishabhadev lived like a madman, naked and with disheveled hair. Then the Lord took the sacrificial fire within himself, and he left Brahma Varta to tour the whole world. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Nice to be with everyone here today. And thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, especially such an amazing chapter as this, chapter 5 of the 5th canto. There is 6 shlokas within this chapter in the Srila Prabhupada shloka book, shlokas most quoted by Srila Prabhupada. And there's many other shlokas in this chapter also that are well known. So it's a very famous chapter. It's Lord Rishabhadev's teachings. He, in 27 verses, gives such a comprehensive overview of devotional service. It's quite impressive. The thing is that we read this, and the first time we read this, it may strike us quite strongly. Like there's a lot of strong statements in there, big asks for a conditioned soul. And especially here, we're hearing in the purport that this is a verse specifically meant for sannyasis. So straight away you're thinking, wow, that's not for me, because I'm not a sannyasi. That's like, 75-year-old plus, right? Or someone who's very advanced in devotional service like Lord Chaitanya. Maybe he can do it. He can take sannyas at 24, but not me. So yeah, that's maybe not, this verse isn't for me. The thing is, though, that we can become very familiar with the books. When we first read them, perhaps not. I remember when I first started reading the first canto, I couldn't necessarily agree with it. I mean, it was a statement, it was a claim, and I was like, well, I can't necessarily verify it or agree with it, but I can't say it's not true, because what do? We grow up in an education system where we're told so much stuff that we don't actually know is true. And actually, this is something very, very important that we should all deeply consider. It's known as the anchoring bias. The first thing you learn in life about a particular subject, you have a tendency towards. So just because, speaking for myself, I've grown up in a nonsense scientific upbringing of the world with a certain evolutionary perspective, by default, I've got a bias towards believing that's true, just because it's the first thing I learned, even though it's totally nonsense. And by intelligence, I can understand there's so many problems with it and it's bogus. But because it was the first thing I learned, naturally, I've got a bias towards it. Whereas someone who was born in another part of the world who may have had a different upbringing may not have that same issue because they were taught something else from the beginning. So we should always be conscious of this, that we have an anchoring bias. The first thing we hear about a particular topic or subject, we tend to think that that's the standard that everything else is judged by, even if it's wrong. So people may come to Krishna consciousness from a Western upbringing and they may immediately think, I don't know if I can accept this as true. But they don't think to understand that what they've been taught that they're growing up is maybe far less true and far less logical. We don't by default think that because of this anchoring bias, because this is our basis, our foundation, which we grew up on. We judge everything else based on that, even if it's wrong. So that's one important thing to be aware of. But anyway, getting back to the point, is that we may become familiar with the Bhagavatam. We may read the statements, and like I said, I couldn't verify it. I couldn't say yes, it's true, or no, it's not. But okay, it's a statement, and I'll just keep reading and see what else is in here. And of course, the Bhagavatam provides very comprehensive, impressive knowledge on many different topics. So I kept reading, of course, because it was very incredible. I'd never read any book like it. But the thing is, after we read it, because speaking for myself, we have a material mind, we read the same verses, the same purports again, and we start thinking, okay, yeah, maybe I kind of thought it was okay first time around. Second time around, I'm thinking, maybe I don't really know how to apply this. I don't know what to do with this. This is some incredible information, but what do I actually do with it? And so we hear things like death, and more death. And as it's mentioned, devotees are very familiar with the concept of death. We talk about it so much. Whereas, generally speaking, the general public don't. So when you start talking about death a lot, they think, what's up with this guy? Is he a downer or something? Is he real pessimistic? But devotees start taking it for granted that, we just talk about it all the time, so what's the big deal? So we may become familiar with the concept of death and ourselves forget that we're going to die, even though we're always talking about it. Isn't it? Like, do any of us here right now think that we may die today, or tomorrow, or the day after? Even though we're always talking about it and we're always trying to be conscious of it, still, do we actually consider we may just die very soon? Do we actually think that? So this is what I mean. We can become familiar. We take all these things for granted. we just switch off because I've heard it all before, right? Yeah, I know that. I'm not the body. Yes, I know. I may die. Yes, I know. It's like we become so familiar. Hare Krishna. This is the mantra I chant. Yes, I know this mantra. So therefore I don't need to pay attention and space out. It's like, so the material mind is basically the main problem. Whatever topic it is, that's the main issue. And actually, this is what Shukadeva Goswami will start speaking about in the next chapter, that the material mind is basically the source of all your problems. And if you go through the Bhagavatam and you study all the different sections, basically that's it. And Krishna's saying the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita, the mind's the best friend or the worst enemy. So that's the thing that we're dealing with here, becoming familiar. So it's just the mind, the material mind, thinking, oh, I've heard this all before, just like I've heard the Hare Krishna mantra before. No, if you'd heard it, you'd never want to stop hearing it. That's actually material mind. No, you haven't heard it. That's the thing. It won't actually listen. So yes, these statements can be very strong because we may think, yes, I can't apply this yet. And so maybe I'll just go to another section of the Bhagavatam that's maybe something I can apply. So even though we may become familiar, put it aside, whatever, that doesn't mean that these verses aren't full of nectar. So it's just like a honey jar. You have a jar of honey, and it's full of something very, very sweet and amazing and nectarian. Honey is full of sweetness. But we just look at the label, read the verse, and then put it to the side. Next verse, right? Pick up the next jar of honey, look at the label, put it to the side. That's what we may do as we're going through the Bhagavatam. Every verse is a jar of honey. We can open it up and there's nectar inside, but we just read the label and put it to the side. But it doesn't mean, just because we do that, doesn't mean that the nectar is not there. So we just need to become more qualified to open the jar, get sufficient strength, or sufficient boldness to apply some of what's being said in the Shastra. So this verse today that we're reading it's basically, we've come to the end of Lord Rishabhadev's teachings. So Shukadeva Goswami is now beginning to speak. So Lord Rishabhadev speaks from the beginning of this chapter through to verse 27. And what Shukadeva Goswami is pointing out in particular today is, and what Prabhupada is also emphasizing, is that why did Lord Rishabhadev instruct his sons? And secondly, even though he instructed his sons, and what was the reason for that, who were those instructions actually meant for? So naturally, you think if you're someone speaking to someone, then what you're speaking is meant for that person. But yes, that may be true, but it also may not be true. For example, we also have Krishna speaking to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna didn't need to hear Bhagavad Gita. He's a perfected soul, pure devotee, eternal associate of the Lord. He didn't need to hear one word of that. He's already there. But nevertheless, he acted as the audience so Krishna could give everyone else in this material world what we need to hear. So Lord Rishabhadev, he's instructing his sons, first of all, to set an example of how a father should act. So, of course, if one follows the proper Vedic protocol of life, where one takes the Vanaprastha order after finishing their household life, then that means one leaves. And before one leaves, as we're hearing Lord Rishabhadev is doing, he's giving instruction to his sons, how to manage everything, what the goal of life is, how to conduct yourself, etc., etc. And this was part of Lord Rishabhadev's mission, to set the perfect example for others. This is mentioned in text 14 of the previous chapter. And also in the previous chapter, in text number 15, the verse is almost identical to Bhagavad Gita 3:21, Yad Yad Acharati Shreshtas. And the verse reads, whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow. So that was exactly what Lord Rishabhadev was doing. He is basically setting the perfect example. So this was one of the reasons for Lord Rishabhadev's advent, to teach by example. We see other instances of this where a a father is teaching a child who's already perfect. So Lord Rishabhadev's children, the 100 sons, they're all perfect. They're basically on a platform that's, to myself, inconceivable. You know, they're such an elevated soul. But nevertheless being instructed by their father. And we see Jagannath Mishra do this in the case with Nimai Pandit as well. Or rather, he wasn't so much a Pandit at that stage, he was still in his younger years. But still, Jagannath Mishra is instructing his son, Lord Chaitanya. And in the chapter 14 of the Adi Leela, we see how Jagannath Mishra, he has a dream. And in his dream, he sees a Brahmana. And this Brahmana asks him, why are you instructing your son? Don't you know who he is? He's a perfected soul, you know, he's the Supreme Personality of God. You can't teach him anything. He's already perfect. What's the use in your instructing him? And so Jagannath Mishra, he gives a very interesting reply. He says, it's the duty of the father to instruct his son. So first of all, he's doing what is his duty. Even if he's not a common man, but Narayana, still it is the duty of the father to instruct the son. This is a very interesting point. That duty is so important that even if it's not necessary to perform, still one should do it. Like the goal has already been achieved. The son already has been educated. He's a self-perfected soul. He doesn't need education, but still, out of duty, Jagannath Mishra is instructing him. So this is very interesting. And of course, we see Krishna himself say that in Bhagavad Gita. If I did not perform prescribed duties, certainly all men would follow my path. And thus, you know, the world would lead to ruination because I'm setting the wrong example. So this idea of setting example is very important. So much so that even if it's not required, still one should do it just so others can learn the right thing to do. And so the next point that I wanted to get onto, which is Rishabhadev is instructing his sons, first of all, just to set the example. And then secondly, who were those instructions actually meant for? So these instructions, as Prabhupada says in the purport, they're actually meant for sannyasis who intend to become advanced devotees. So I was thinking about this. Who is a sannyasi? This is an often asked question. And actually in chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, I want to understand what's the meaning of renunciation and also about the renounced order of life. Can you explain this to me? So sannyas, of course, the primary understanding that we have of it when we hear the word sannyasi, immediately we think the sannyas ashram. We think of a person who's in their ashram. And that's true. That's the literal meaning of sannyas, one who's taken the renounced order of life. And so this instruction of Lord Rishabhadev is for those people who are tending to become advanced devotees. But we can also take sannyasi in its more generic sense. So as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text number 1, Anashita kama phalang, karyam kama karoti yaha, sa sannyasi cha yogi cha, na niragnir na cha priyaha. So Krishna says, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated, that person is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So Krishna is giving a much more generic definition here of one who is a sannyasi, basically someone who's not attached to the fruits of their work. Krishna doesn't say someone who's gone through the fire sacrifice ceremony, taken sannyas vow. He doesn't say that. He says one who's not attached to the fruits of his work and works as he is obligated. And Srila Prabhupada confirms this broader definition in his purport in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 11, where he says, there are many members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness who work very hard in their office or in the factory or some other place. And whatever they earn, they give to the society. Such highly elevated souls are actually sannyasis and are situated in the renounced order of life. Very interesting. And also in text 49 of the same chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, Srila Prabhupada says in text 49, the purport, the person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. So again, another more generic definition. If you are Krishna conscious and you're actually properly acting in that way as a Krishna conscious person, then you're a sannyasi. And some people have been mentioned to say that, Arjuna is the real sannyasi. He's acting in perfect Krishna consciousness. He's doing what Krishna wants. He's renouncing everything for Krishna. So even though he's in the Grihastha ashram and he's acting as a Kshatriya, simultaneously he's a sannyasi. So there's different ways of looking at this word sannyasi. So these instructions that Lord Rishabhadev is giving are for anyone who is sacrificing for Krishna, who is intending to become more advanced in their Krishna consciousness. So that person may be in the sannyas ashram or they may not be. And even if we don't fit into either of those two classifications of sannyasi, because basically both of them are advanced devotees, still we can learn from the instructions of Lord Rishabhadev. We can learn the principles that he's speaking and apply them to whatever degree our current capacity of devotional service or level of surrender to Krishna allows. And the other thing is that if these instructions are for such elevated souls, then we can just appreciate that we're getting some quite incredible wisdom here. We're not getting just the ABCs. I mean, Lord Rishabhadev does give the ABCs in these verses. We're never too advanced to hear the basics. Prabhupada himself would continuously lecture on the point that you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. Never got sick of it. Not that he needed to hear it, but it's out of compassion, out of mercy, such great souls will always speak on these things. And actually those who are advanced also relish hearing it, even though they're the basic points, because it's about devotional service, it's related to Krishna, and it's helping the conditioned souls make progress in devotional service. So great souls are happy to hear such topics being discussed. And the great souls, they understand that every syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is flooded with Krishna prema. So that means the descriptions of the universal form, as well as the descriptions in the 10th canto, wherever you read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole modus operandi, the whole reason it's being spoken, Shukadeva Goswami's whole bhav and mood is speaking out of Krishna prema. So whether he's speaking about the universal form or the atom or whatever, or he's speaking about Krishna's leelas, it's all motivated out of love for Krishna that he's speaking these things. So everything is worth hearing. So I'll stop here. This is a break point. I've got more to say, but if anyone has anything to add, share, any questions anyone may have, it'd be nice to hear. If anyone has anything they'd like to bring up. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, thank you very much for briefly pointing out, summarizing the verse so nicely, and particularly the things you have told, the education we have in the beginning, that you told about the anchoring bias that we start in the beginning. Yes, that is often the problem of when we want to preach to the people, that often, particularly the Western people, they have got a bias because they have been trained in a way that this education of spiritual education, what we are talking about, is not at all initiated there at all. So it conflicts with the ideas they have built from the beginning. So that is a real impediment in the sense. And Prabhupada has told whenever he has visited Western so-called big universities, Harvard, Stanford, and other universities, he has tried to tell them that, do you have any departments in which deals with the spirit, the difference between the living beings and the dead body? He told at one place I think, if I'm not wrong, in Massachusetts University, where he told, you have a great mechanical departments. So you have, like, when a motor is moving, and the machine is wrong, you try to fix it by fixing the engine. But if a person dies, can you do that for a human being? And they were a bit stunned what he's talking about. It, how can a dead man can be made alive? But that means the basic things that the life force in the body is most important than the inert part of it. That education was missing in even everywhere now. What we get in the name of education really misses that very point. And the question of its subsequent realization that you're told, mere knowing this is not enough, but we have to realize it in our life that the that is our real identity, and the bodily conception where we come from is insignificant. As a human being, this is our duty to realize it, that I am not this body. That is the fundamental question, and this fundamental question is not even known to the majority of the people. That is the real hurdle nowadays for us, most of us in the Krishna conscious movement, to speak to the people, and they do not realize it often in the Western world in particular. And thank you very much for bringing this point, that this anchoring bias is often what I will say, an hurdle for spreading Krishna conscious movement.
Yeah, it's a, thank you for mentioning that. It's like many things, it's like, was it knowing the enemy is half the way to the battle, winning the battle? Because often, if you don't know who you're fighting, how can you win? So the classic example, as I was mentioning earlier, is the material mind. That's the ultimate enemy. But yeah, most people don't know that that's the real enemy. So therefore, they can't fight it. And they may conquer the whole world, be a big emperor or something, but they didn't conquer their own mind. So therefore, they still lost. So similarly, as soon as we know the enemy, then we can start fighting it. So just by knowing that there's this anchoring bias, you can bring it to people's attention, and you can mention the research done about this and show how it's true. So as soon as you bring that up to someone, because you can read a whole book. For example, the book Searching for Vedic India by His Holiness Dave Swami is an incredible book. And it really helps deconstruct your faith in modern science, and just shows how there's so much nonsense there and the way they do things, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's so many other books like that by devotee scholars. But just mentioning the anchoring bias is just a simple sutra that you can just present to someone. There's a few others as well, but that one is so, it's just such a, as soon as you bring it to someone's attention, you're just telling them straight away. It's like you're automatically predisposed and you can't help it. And that they may not accept that. And you'll be like, okay, you can do the research yourself. You can go home. You can look up the anchoring bias. I'm just letting you know. You know, it's just the fact. It is what it is. And if people don't want to hear that, then, you know, that's okay. We just give them some prasadam and be nice to them. They can accept Krishna in that way, whatever they can take. But if they're ready to start listening to some logic, it's such a simple point. And you could say it's even a point that you could bring up before you're not the body. Because why are they rejecting that idea that they're not the body? Because they've got an anchoring bias. So if you bring that point up first, and they realize that, oh, maybe I do have an anchoring bias, then you can bring up, okay, now you're not the body. So yeah, as you said, it may be difficult, but that difficulty in outreach is just a greater opportunity to do more service. As Dave Mrita Maharaj always likes to say, whenever we find some difficulty in any department, it's just great, an opportunity for more service. So we can always look at it as a positive. And of course, the Acharya, Srila Prabhupada himself, just saw unlimited opportunities for service, and any impediment was just another excuse to go deeper into Krishna consciousness and spread it more. As there's a famous, well, I wouldn't say famous, but there's a well-known book called The Obstacle is the Way. And the whole point of that book is that the so-called obstacle that you're seeing, and oh no, this is an impediment, that's actually the way forward. For example, Prabhupada had to battle with the deprogrammers, and there's a whole bunch of nonsense there, and it went to court. But by going to court, it actually ended up increasing the prestige of the Krishna consciousness movement. So initially something that seems like a great obstacle actually gave greater publicity and greater respect for the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's always another thing to think about as well. So if we finding difficulty in outreach, one way we can look at it is it's making us become more powerful preachers. So we may initially face an obstacle, but someone like Chaitanya Charan, he's a good example of finding so many ways to connect with Western people with their mindset. He's got unlimited ways to do that. So you can see it as an obstacle, or you can see it as a way to increase your service. And if you don't know how to overcome that obstacle, then yeah, you just cheat. You just follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. Someone has already figured it out. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Someone already knows how to do it somewhere in the movement. So just find out how they're successfully doing it and just copy and paste and customize according to your local community like that. But thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Thank you for letting me speak a little more. I think, should we stop there? Is that time? Or do we have time for any more?
So we're still waiting if anyone has any questions, and if it is not, then probably you can stop. You can, yeah, close the class. It appears, Prabhuji, there is no other person to make any comments. So thank you very much for your very nice class. And particularly the last one is an explanation that obstacle is often the starting point to start to preach. And if we know what are the obstacles, we can solve it more easily. And thank you for sharing your experience. And once again, very nice class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Vancha kalpatarupyascha kripa
Jayavaccha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Is Gadai Gauranga Prabhu ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.